And greetings. Now this is a channel where I usually speak on something pertaining to music or something of an esoteric occult value. Now I'm not, I don't have any preference as far as racial history goes or racial heritage goes. I'm mixed. I have both white and black family, so I'm open to all. But primarily over the years, yeah, a lot of people. I look a lot like my father in a few ways. uh, I'm going to put a picture up of my father, and I want to explain to people, growing up, even though I'm mixed, I'm not really that, a lot of people might think I'm Hispanic or Middle Eastern or something like that. A lot of the people from the black community have always gravitated to me because they can see my father in me. Now, my father knew a lot of people, a lot of people. My father knew people all over the country. He was a United States Marine. And he was a hard worker. He had some good friends, but he spent a lot of time in California. He spent a lot of time in New York, and oftentimes people would just come up to me and be like, "Hey, isn't your father Carlen?" And I say, "Carlen, yeah, that's my father." And they say, "Man, your father would have like 4 or 5 Cadillacs. Your father had like 6, 7 girls giving him money all the time. And man, me one time in Chicago, your father took me over to Lou Rawls' house, and we would hang out, blah 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 blah." And and I say, "Really?" And he'd be like, "Man, my name is Wheeler the dealer. We used to go to he'd say, "Man, your father used to go to the players' balls back in the '60s and stuff in Chicago. Your father had all these girls out there and stuff." And I'm like, "Really?" And they're like, "Yeah, man, you ever need anything, let me know, blah blah blah." And coming from a smaller community, a smaller black community in Michigan, it's interesting because I can go to different areas. I'll be in different areas of the area called known as Muskegon Heights, and people will just walk up to me and be like, "We're related." They'd be like, "I'm related." They're like, "Yeah, isn't your father is Carlen?" And then there'll be an older like black woman be like, "Yeah, that's Carlen's son." Blah, blah, blah. And they'll be like, you don't know I'm your cousin." Or I'll have people be telling me I'm their brother or something like that, and it's just interesting. And because of that, because the kind of guys he was friends with, these guys were into music. They like to go to like real music, old school music like jazz and music from the '60s. I would grow up around older black people who knew everything about music, and older black people who were from like the old school from Mississippi. My father was born in 1939, so he was from a different generation. He grew up in the '40s and '50s. Most black people my age, their father didn't grow up in that era. Their father wasn't born until like the '60s, and my father was back '40s, '50s. So there was a generational inheritance just from being my father's son. So I look at stuff, and I'm very hip to the '60s and '70s. I'm a '60s and '70s researcher myself, formally. But I go back and I look at Soul Train, and I look at the newer generations of people who come to today's world, and my interpretation is really good because I had so many people that my father knew, so many different people, not just from the area I'm at, but people just be like, black guys from Detroit, old, be like, "Man, that was your father." They were like, "You're my cousin." I was like, "Damn," you know, and and so that's pretty cool. So on this channel, I have the Jameel Rawls show, and the Jameel Rawls show. Um, And that's why I do interviews. I can just talk to people. Like you'll see me doing interviews with guys like Barefoot Pookie, or you'll see me doing interviews with all these old school people and stuff. Or I just know how to communicate with people. Now you have the Jameel Rawls show website, and that's a picture of my grandfather. Uh, he was cool. My grandfather was so cool. He was an officer in the Air Force. And that's my father. And then my father got burnt. If you see pictures of my father uh, after, I don't know what year it was. My father was tarring a roof. My father was tarring a roof, and he was actually, now my father never went to prison, but he was in jail for he got into it with some girl he was dating, and he ended up putting his hands on her. He ended up in jail. And he ended up, while he was in jail on work release, he ended up falling in some tar and getting burnt. But my father and my mother were married before I was born. So my father had a lot of different, he had a lot of children. He has a lot of children. Like, I got brothers and sisters, we don't even have the same last name, but we all know we're related though. And so there's a picture of him when he was in the service, then my uncle, my grandfather Bobo, and then Bobo got a lot of children. This is a small community, like the black people in Muskegon. Like, this is small, like we all know each other. So that's part of what I do. So my father, you know, so he spent a lot of time, you know, in the 60s and 70s, like older groups and older bands and stuff. And then people, like, I got a friend in the family who toured with New Birth, and he knew my father really well. And, you know, my father, he had so many stories. He was dating Miss Black America back in the 1960s. There used to be a time where you didn't have just Miss America because of segregation. You had Miss America, Miss Black America, and he was dating Miss America. And, you know, these women used to give him money. I don't know what he was into, but he could just, women would just give him money and buy him Cadillacs and all kinds of stuff. And I'm serious, I'm not playing around. Like, this guy had like 4 or 5 Cadillacs and all this stuff. And, you know, so I was born and my father passed away when I was younger. My father passed away when I was about like 5 years old. And so I remember spending a lot of time with him, though he was always there. And then he passed away, and I think that did something. I think, looking back on my childhood, I think that created a dilemma for me growing up when other children had their parents versus me. I only had, my father passed away. But then all my father's friends. My father had a lot of friends, a lot of family, and luckily I was able to be raised around them, meet them. And then, but I grew up privileged. Like, I grew up, I was spoiled, man. I had all video games and nice clothes, everything I wanted. But then my mother would always make sure that I got a chance to be around my family. You know, always be, always be in the hood, hang out with my relatives and stuff and friends. And I would just sit there and listen to the older black people just sit there and talk and talk and talk and talk. And I would just absorb all the information. Like, they would teach me how to shine shoes and stuff. And that's kind of like some of my perspective, like the penny thing with Abraham Lincoln, how the other presidents turned their back on Lincoln. Hmm. Okay, so this is a video. I'm usually on this channel at least once a month. And usually this is the time, this channel, like last video I did, Boys in the Hood, I spoke about Cody Scott, Sneaker Shakur, and the video Boys in the Hood, the relationship between the real monster of life and the Sneaker Shakur. That was an esoteric metaphysical breakdown I did on that. Then there's the Indigo Children interview, BG Knockout, G-Bone, you know. And that's interesting because speaking of the 60s, I can always connect, you know, a lot of stuff I know, a lot of stuff I talk about, you'd be surprised how smart these guys are. These guys in the rap game will instinctively know what I'm speaking of. When we start talking about like the Black Panthers or something like that, they just right off, bam, they'll already know what I'm talking about. Slave plantations and zombie voodoo puffer. Here's an interview I did, a real ghost story, and a paranormal interview I did with a girl from Muskegon. Okay, all right. So I'm just keeping up with the channel, and I encourage people to look forward to more stuff in the future. And I wish everybody a blessed day. But that's me. I'm just showing, because I got my website. I show my father on there. That's a perception you have of me. Is where I'm coming from.